The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy ho, everybody. Greetings from Minneapolis. Come to you cordless. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 247. If you're keeping score with your cards at home, and that means if you can do a little math in your head, this Wednesday is going to be our 250th episode. And who do we have on? Our old friend Tim Conaway. Why not? You know, might as well have the editor of Hustler on. And that's what Tim was. So it's the start of July. I hope you guys had a good weekend. I did. I slept. I've been sleeping because, believe it or not, doing this tires me out. I don't know why. It's like I'm really kind of pissed off at my old age. 20 years ago, I could work 16, 20 hours a day. Now 12 tops, and I'm sleeping the rest of the time. Anyway, yeah, I had a pretty good weekend too. Our entire month is booked up. The whole thing, all of it. We have guests coming on up until August 1st. So tonight, Jeff Dornik's joining us. He's the CEO of Pickax.com, which is a new Twitter ex-competitor. And also he's an author. He's got a book coming up called Following the Leader. Really interesting premise he's got here. We're interested in talking to him about that. Tomorrow night, Bill Walton, the former CEO of Allied Capital, and he's also a film producer, a real film producer. I mean, I'm also a film producer, but I'm not a real film producer. He's coming on tomorrow to talk to him. He also runs a blog podcast called The Bill Walton Show, pretty successful. Wednesday, our 250th show, Tim Conaway's on. Thursday, we had a cancellation. Gary Gallus, the economist, he's going to be joining us later this month. We rescheduled him for the 30th. And so taking his place is going to be Larry Newman, our old friend Larry Newman, Bigfoot investigator and bail bondsman extraordinaire. We'll find out who he's been chasing across the country because they've skipped bail and all the Bigfoot investigations he's done. That's Thursday. Next Monday, I'm taking off for a family event. On Tuesday, Spencer Morrison will be here. He's an author. He's in a book called, and what is it called? It's called, hold on, let me check. It's called Reshore, How Tariffs Will Bring Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream. And this is kind of interesting. There's been articles in the press over the last couple days now where the American academia has been kind of coming around to the fact that this whole tariff scheme of Trump's might actually work. I mean, theoretically, the big complaint everybody says that it shouldn't. And I just happened to mention, if you were listening to our panel discussion on Monday, we had the return of our all-star panel for the first time in like 3 or 4 months. I was talking about the fact that I just learned recently that William McKinley in 1900 did pretty much the same thing Trump is doing now, and it worked in spades. So, I mean, so much for our experts, you know. And speaking of that, so let's have join Jeff Dornik right now, because he's not an expert, but he knows what he's talking about. Joining us from his office in Orange County, California, the CEO of Pickax.com and author Jeff Dornik. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
You look fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Right back at you.
I was young once. No, you do. You look great. All right, we were talking before we were on the air here, and you're talking about living in Orange County. All right, now I lived in Los Angeles for quite a few years too, but when I lived there, it wasn't quite as crazy. It seems like, no, it doesn't seem like. It is that what's her name? Kamala Harris, what's her name? is thinking about running for governor of California. She doesn't have a chance in hell of ever even getting the nomination for president again. Even the Democrats don't want her. But I predict she might be the next governor of California, and that's because the voters in California are crazy. Now, my question: why are they crazy?
Well, so there's a couple different, components to this. Number one is you're dealing with actually the vast majority of the crazies are in the major cities. So you've got Oakland, San Francisco, LA, and then San Diego, which is a little bit more purple than the rest. But especially when you're dealing with Oakland, San Francisco, Sacramento, LA. That's where all the crazies are, the woke, they're all competing with each other to see how far left and progressive they can possibly get. The rest of the state is actually pretty red. If you look at the map, almost the rest of the entire state is pretty hardcore MAGA red. And so what's ended up happening is I was looking at the demographics during the last recall of Gavin Newsom, and it was interesting because there was a strong percentage of Democrats that were sick and tired of Gavin Newsom that were going to vote to actually get rid of him. They ended up getting scared into going back to supporting Gavin Newsom because Larry Elder was going to be the presumptive person who would take over if Gavin Newsom was reelected. And they saw him as Donald Trump incarnate, representative in the state of California, and they're terrified of MAGA. Now, so I don't think that necessarily the entire voting base is crazy. It's just they are listening to the propaganda and the lies. And this is why I've been saying, if we actually want to flip the state of California, we can't be running a hardcore red MAGA Republican running up against a Democrat, because the Democrats will win every time. What you need to run really is a centrist independent who can actually bring a lot of the Democrats away from voting Democrat because they're sick and tired of what the Democrats are doing, but also that are too afraid to vote Republican. The way that you would win would be like a Nicole Shanahan type person that could run in the middle, in the center, pull both left and right. I think then we could actually have a chance of taking it away from the Democrats.
That makes total sense. Does that person have to be a Democrat, or could you think a Republican could get away with it?
I think you could probably get away with a Republican who would be considered an outsider, but it can't be somebody that is fully aligned with Donald Trump, and that's something that a lot of Republicans have a hard time with dealing with, of bringing themselves to vote for, let's say, somebody who's not a Trumper. But if you want to win the state of California, I think you need to go somebody who's either an outsider Republican or somebody who is an independent or a former Democrat.
God, you make a lot of sense. You think about running yourself?
I don't think that'll ever happen.
And why is that? Because think about this, Jeff. The problem, if you ask me, with our democracy at the present time is that nobody of any real accomplishment wants to run for public office. And so because of that, all the people who run for a public office are losers. That's my just in a nutshell. I want to ask you another question too, because you've addressed this in some of your publicists addressed this in some of their releases, and this has been a constant theme. God, people have been talking about this for 5 years now, but once again, it's kind of rearing its ugly head again, and that is, why does the mainstream media seem to be in the pocket of the government? That does not. Now, I mean, I'll throw something out here, because there was a thing called Project Nightingale in the 1970s, where the public or the press was actually being paid off by the CIA. I think that still might be happening, but I still don't understand why. I don't know if it's that pervasive, or what are your thoughts on this? What's going on?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that that program, I would say, whether or not it's officially that title or not, but it still has continued. I mean, from what I understand, the CIA still does have an office out there in Hollywood. Has a lot of connections with a lot of Hollywood producers and studios, and they oversee actually a lot of the portrayals of the military and intelligence agencies and things like that in films and movies. I remember I even talked with Dr. Michael Scheuer, who actually has a show on the podcast network that I run, and he's a former CIA guy, and his job, he was actually really high up. His job was to actually track Osama bin Laden and report back to President Clinton and President Bush. Here's where Osama bin Laden is. You want us to take him out? No, he's one of our guys. We're not going to take him out. The whole deal. But I remember asking him about that, and he's like, no, they are in Hollywood pushing particular narratives. Now, there's a couple different scenarios here. Number one, you've got them that are pushing narratives. I don't know necessarily if they're strong arming people to do it. I think it's just kind of like a give and take relationship. They'll give them inside information. They'll let them know, here's what's really going on, all that kind of stuff. On the flip side, you also have a really big issue when it comes to access. And I think the Democrats and the government have really thrived on this, with the mainstream media, with publishing companies, with the entertainment industry, and all of that. And I think that's something where Republicans and conservatives oftentimes we've turned our back on Hollywood a long time ago. But don't forget, decades ago, it was led by people like John Wayne and Walt Disney who were rooting out the communists in Hollywood. And then all of a sudden now it's completely turned on its head to where Hollywood is the communists. And it's completely backwards. But I think that there is this certain component of this symbiotic relationship between the government and the mainstream media and Hollywood and big tech, where they're all kind of working together. And I think some of it is you have the intelligence agencies, which can actually push back a little bit. They offer threats. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg talked about this with Meta and Facebook and the Biden administration, where they were getting threatened with investigations and all that kind of stuff. So there is that. There also is the enticement of money that's oftentimes thrown around, whether it's through nonprofits or tax breaks or different things like that for the studios. So there's a lot of things at play here that conservatives don't necessarily offer, because we're more limited government. Let's lower government. At least allegedly, that's what we're supposed to be, even though the Republican Party not really doing that. But we don't necessarily throw a lot of these enticements out there in the same way that the Democrats do, because our whole idea is let's spend less money, let's limit the government, get the government out of our lives, and then they're using the government to their advantage in order to basically bribe their way to propaganda.
All right, so financial incentive is an obvious one, but you're talking about access, and this is the part I don't get, because the mainstream media, I mean, let's use like the New York Times for an example, the quote unquote paper of record, they can afford to go to blow off access. I mean, if somebody in the government said, well, if you don't do this, we won't give you access to our politicians anymore. The New York Times could actually say they're so powerful, they can say, well, screw you, we don't care, we're just going to keep on writing and people are going to keep on buying. Why? I hate to say this, they seem to be pussies, to use a vernacular phrase. So why is that? What's going on there?
See, I don't think it's necessarily access to politicians. I think it's access to information, and I think that's the kind of access that, let's say, the mainstream media is looking at, is that as long as they play nice with fill in the blank, whichever agency you're talking about, they will give them amazing stories that will go viral, get them information. Whether or not they're true or not is debatable at best, but they will give them inside information. There's always the leaks, there's always the anonymous whistleblowers, there's always a steady flow of information that basically keep their doors open. And if let's just say the New York Times tomorrow decided, you know what, we're going to start telling the truth about everything, that will be completely cut off. And I don't think that the New York Times has the funds or the ability to basically withstand the amount of time and energy and effort it would take to rebuild without that access to inside information. Oftentimes, you could argue it's illegal information that shouldn't be spread because it's classified documents, classified information, insider knowledge from inside the White House, all that kind of stuff. So there is this component to where I think the mainstream media is desperate because they've hitched their wagon to this idea of clicks and impressions, and we just got to go clickbait all the while, and that's really lowered their margins a lot to where you can't stick a journalist on a story for 3 months like they used to be able to do back in the day. Now you got to get an article out today, maybe another one tonight at 5:00, another one tomorrow morning, another one, and all they're doing is just looking at Twitter or their inside sources that are feeding them information that are good enough in order for them to go viral. They don't really care about the truth. And if an intelligence agency or a health agency or the military or whoever it is like, look, we'll continue to give you all these amazing inside stories, you just run with it, of course they're going to continue to play nice.
Why'd you start Pickaxe? By the way, I have the front page here for people to see. I don't know if you can see this.
Yep.
Front page of pickaxe.com. So why did you start this?
Yeah, honestly, so this project kind of began 2 years ago, actually, right after Elon bought X, and it was really interesting because when he bought it, I started seeing the writing on the wall, and I'm like, I don't think he got a loan for $44 billion in order to buy Twitter and convert it to X. But I don't think that he got that in order to defend free speech. And I started looking at their terms of service and a lot of the rhetoric that he was coming out with, and it was clear to me that he was setting things up to be a massive data collection, operation to build his artificial intelligence. And everybody's like, "No, you're crazy, Jeff. He did this for the good of the country, and to bring back free speech." And I'm like, yeah, but then very early on, they put in their terms of service, and I believe that it's actually still in their terms of service, a phrase that says that we offer freedom of speech on X, but not freedom of reach, which means that they'll allow you to say whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that they have to actually let anybody see it. And I always use this example. It's as if it's the equivalent of him going into New York Times Square, setting up a stage with microphones, speakers, sound system, the whole deal. And you're like, we're going to have a free speech event. You can get up there. You can say whatever you want. You get up there, you start talking, and he hits the mute button, or he turns you down to like 1 decibel. And you're like, dude, I thought this was free speech. What are you talking about? He's like, you can say whatever you want. I'm not stopping you.
Right.
I never said anything about the volume of your microphone. That's what's happening on X. So I began to see this, and then I saw and I'm like, so why would he do this? Well, because he wants all of our information. He wants all of our ideas, both left and right, to funnel into the artificial intelligence. Well, guess what happened shortly thereafter? Just I believe a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, XAI, which is the artificial intelligence company that basically runs Grok,
Right.
XAI purchased X. So now X is owned by the artificial intelligence company. Why? Because they're collecting all the massive data, funneling into the AI, and that's basically going to end up making Elon Musk the most powerful man in the planet, because he's got the artificial intelligence, which knows us inside and out. They can target us with ads. They can target us with manipulation and propaganda, and they know what will hit. They know what will go viral. They know what we will respond to. They will know everything about us. And then he's going to be coming out with it with his own cryptocurrency. He's going to be coming out with all these different things that he's doing. Like that was the end game. And so when I started Pickaxe, I'm like, we need a space that's human centered, not AI centered, human centered, but then also where you can have freedom of speech and freedom of reach. We're not going to limit you. We're not going to artificially mess with your algorithms, mess with your reach. If you earn an audience, guess what? You can talk to your audience, and we're not going to restrict that at all. So that's really kind of the inspiration behind Pickaxe, let alone all the censorship I've had to deal with over the years too.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. What's wrong with AI scooping up all information? I mean, I'm a uber curious fella, and to do the show, and I talk to a lot of different other people, I have to read an enormous amount of stuff. So, yep. So what's the difference between me doing it and some server somewhere doing it? Well, I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell me.
No, yeah. So on a micro level, I would say there's nothing wrong with using AI for a whole host of things, right? Because for a lot of us that are trying to be entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or whatever it is, it takes a lot. Where a lot of us are one man bands basically, right? So yeah. we use AI as another tool, just as we use all different kinds of things in order to streamline everything. On a micro level, I don't have a problem with it. Although you could start to get into the moral issue on whether or not because everybody uses it to write articles and write all this kind of stuff. Okay, is that actually plagiarism because it's absorbing all the information from everywhere and you're actually taking other people's ideas and it's spitting them out?
For a second.
Yeah.
Specifically, and this is maybe the geek in me, and I don't know if anybody watching cares, is it a copyright violation? That's been a big deal lately, that people are suing AI companies for copyright violations. And I have to admit, I kind of don't see it, but what do you think?
So here's the problem is that so I think a perfect example was the Hollywood strike that happened a couple of years ago. So in the Hollywood strike, AI was actually a really big thing, a really big part of the negotiations that not a lot of people were actually talking about, because what was happening is the studios were using artificial intelligence to write the first draft of the movie scripts, which takes away the screenwriter's biggest money maker, right? And then they just give it to them to rewrite the scripts. Well, how were they doing it? What they were doing is they were taking all the previous scripts, funneling it into the database for artificial intelligence, and then they would say, I want an action movie that's Mission Impossible meets Guardians of the Galaxy, and throw in a little bit of Will Ferrell and put this in here, and then it pumps out the first draft of a script. Well, okay, so why, if it's taking the information from the original script, is that technically plagiarism because you're using the person's work in order to write your script, but you're not giving any royalties, you're not giving
Right.
any credit, you're not citing your source. And I think that's I think a good example of how you could make the argument that it is technically plagiarism. Another example of the way it's this is used in real life is Google is using artificial intelligence right now in their search results. So this is actually running a lot of bloggers and writers out of business. So what the Google AI is doing, if you type in, I want a recipe for sourdough bread, right? You type in a recipe. The way that it used to be was that they would use the algorithms in order to give you the best search results based upon SEO, and then you would click on a link, and it would take you to a website, probably like a blog or an article or whatever it is, and then you would see, oh, here's a recipe to make sourdough bread, so I can make sourdough bread. Well, now what it's doing is the AI from Google is searching all the different websites. And they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, here's all the websites, here's the common threads. We're going to give you the best recipe for sourdough bread as the result before you see any of the links to any of these articles.
Right.
Well, so basically what did they do? They scraped all the information from all the search results. They give it to you so that way you no longer need to click on the link to go to that person's website, which affects their ability to earn income. But that information was taken from this website and they're not getting credit for it. So from that standpoint, you could argue that that would be considered plagiarism and copyright infringement and taking away somebody else's, talents or work for the benefit of these big tech companies, which are basically just eliminating the need for human beings and just centralizing the power under these big billionaire oligarchs, basically.
All right, I'm kind of stupid. What do you think? I actually see. I know the argument. I don't actually know what to think about this. To me, in some ways, it's kind of half dozen, 1/6 of the other. I don't know what to think. What do you think? Do you think that's plagiarism?
I would think that it is plagiarism, and especially because we do know that the AI does have the capabilities and the ability to cite their sources, as we begin to see, like, Chat GPT. If you ask it to cite its sources, what information did you pull it from, it can cite its sources. So we know that it has the ability to do so. I also kind of have a problem with the fact that you're basically eliminating the need for human beings and our creativity, and basically centralizing it and kind of sterilizing it to a certain degree with artificial intelligence, which only benefits like one central company, right? You're taking away the human creativity, the human creative spirit. This is happening in the music industry, in the film industry, and for bloggers, for writers, for a whole host of industries right now, where you're taking away the need for humans. You're taking their content and you're applying it to this technology, which eliminates even your ability to earn an income, your ability to earn revenue, your ability to get views, whatever it is, and you're basically giving it all to these centralized, tech companies. And then when you look at the end result, where you see both Elon Musk and Bill Gates and even Sam Altman and all these guys, they're basically saying that within the next 10 years, we're no longer going to need human beings at all in the workforce. So in a decade, basically they believe that they're going to be able to replace the entire human species in the workforce and be able to replace it with artificial intelligence and robots in less than 10 years. To me, what you're doing is you're giving all the power to a handful of billionaire elites, and then you're taking away all of our ability to earn a living. So then where does that leave us? Well, you see guys like Andrew Yang and even Elon Musk and all these guys. What they're saying is that, well, okay, so you're no longer going to need to work. So we're going to give you something called universal basic income. So you can now have income. You can basically, it was interesting. I'll give you a quick story and then I'll throw it back to you. So Elon Musk was being interviewed by Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of years ago. And this happened like right before the whole October 7th, craziness happened. So Netanyahu sitting down with Elon and he asked him, what's the end game for artificial intelligence? Like, where is all this going? And Elon says, okay, it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be Terminator, where AI and the robots are going to take over and we're just going to be in never-ending war unless they could just completely wipe us off the face of the earth. So we're either face Terminator or we face heaven on earth. And then Netanyahu's like, okay, let's go with that one. What does heaven on earth look like? And he goes on to explain that basically will no longer need to work. We'll all be connected to the internet directly through our brain, and we'll have artificial intelligence access to information just by thinking about it, right? We could basically we can watch a movie and just close our eyes and watch a movie. What it was interesting, what he was describing was the old Pixar movie WALL-E, about all these guys that are just basically, they think it and then they instantly get it. He basically describing a hedonistic lifestyle where you just get whatever you want whenever you want it. There's no need to work, no need to do anything. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this and I'm like, that doesn't sound like heaven. Like,
it sounds like hell.
Yeah, you're taking away the entire purpose of being a human, which is to struggle, to grow, to become a better person.
Right.
You're basically just saying, just be an all-consuming blob of flesh. Just sit there, do nothing, and we'll give you a little bit of money, and you just think about it. We'll print your food with a 3D printer. We'll do all, like, that is not a world that I want to live in. So Elon Musk is giving us two worlds. We can have Terminator or we can have WALL-E. And I want neither. So that's a major problem right there.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. It is kind of the perfect balance would be something in the middle, But I've been saying for years that the problem with AI is that half the country and then by 2030 is going to be unemployed. And I don't know if it's going to replace everybody, at least not right away, but it's certainly going to replace any menial mental or physical work. I mean, especially now there's humanoid robots outfitted with AI that they're going to be factory workers, and you can buy one for $25,000 and they never need a vacation, they never even need a rest.
Yep.
And so yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think to piggyback off of that, Elon Musk has said that I believe within the next few years he's expecting there to be a billion, like with a billion of these humanoid robots that he's going to develop through Tesla. And it's not just working in a factory. Like if you go back, you look at his launch of his new Tesla taxi, and then they brought out the humanoid robots. Like, that to me was one of the most terrifying things that I've seen. And I'm like, people do not buy into this, because he's literally talking. If you watch the clip where they were talking about his Optimus humanoid robots, like, he's talking about them being your chef, being your children's teacher in school, being your children's babysitter, right? Like right. We're not just talking about like, oh, a factory worker where we no longer have to go work in a dangerous factory anymore or go mining or for, no, we're talking about actually teaching your children, being a medical doctor, performing surgeries, sitting down with you, a psychologist, right? Yeah. If you look at Elon's artificial intelligence, he has actually counselors and psychologists that are AI that you can actually chat with if you're struggling with mental illness or depression or whatever it is. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, you're taking away that human to human connection. You're taking away everything that it means to be human. And just because you can do something, does that mean that you should?
That also reminds me of the fact, I mean, we have a whole generation Z now that between being locked up for COVID and the advent of social media, basically they don't know how to communicate with each other in person to person anyway. The thing about this whole thing that I find really scary is that if half the country is unemployed, and I'm making a generalization here, you know what unemployed people do? Crime. I mean, I don't have to tell you this. I'm a computer programmer. Most people, I've said this on the program before, most people don't realize this. Most of the hacking that comes out of Russia, those people aren't actually hacking for money. They're basically hacking for their own amusement. You're talking about highly educated people who don't have a job. So they just fuck around online because they can, just for their own, entertainment. And that, I could see that happening in spades when you have a whole bunch of people that are not employed,
Yeah. Well, and also if you look at the most quote unquote successful cities in America, okay, LA, New York, the places that everybody looks to, where you have the ultra wealthy. What do they also have? They also have the worst mental illness rates out of anybody.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting. You're right. I never thought of that. That's true.
Right. So we're going to be dealing with massive depression. We're going to be dealing with all different kinds of psychological issues. They're going to be on all sorts of mental health drugs and whatever it is, which then leads to all these other sort of mental health issues and problem that we're seeing. So what we're saying is that, okay, so we're going to take away your entire purpose. We're going to take away your need to work. We're going to take away your need to be a better person. And guess what we're going to leave you with? We're going to leave you with a little bit of money, a hedonistic lifestyle, and a bunch of mental illness and depression. Again, I'm just sitting here, is nobody thinking about the repercussions of this at all? And then we haven't even got into the repercussions of the actual technology that these guys are making, where they want to connect your brain to the internet with artificial intelligence, where if you go back and you listen to Elon Musk's very first interview that he gave on Joe Rogan's podcast, he was bragging about the fact that the end goal here is that they want to connect your brain to the internet through AI, but then also that they would have the ability to erase your memories and replace them with new ones, which he's justifying as, for trauma victims and PTSD. And I've talked with a few different people that struggle with it, and they're like, yeah, in the short term that would be great, but also on the flip side, you're taking away that need to kind of get through a lot of those issues and actually work through it and actually get to the other side and learn. You don't want to take that away from somebody permanently, but then also what are the ramifications of it? Let's say you get the brain chip, right? You get the Neuralink brain chip, and it connects to the internet, which I always remind everybody, anything that's connected to the internet is hackable. Okay. So now you have a brain chip. Yeah. You have a brain chip. You're opening yourself up to be hacked. What's to stop a hacker from erasing your memory and replacing it with a new one if it has the capability to do so?
Yeah.
And here's the crazy thing. You wouldn't know because your memory was erased.
It's the Manchurian Candidate on steroids.
Exactly.
What it is.
Imagine if you had a hacker, right? And let's say they have Trump derangement syndrome, right? You go in there, you erase everybody's memory of Trump ever being president. Like, imagine let's just say half of the country forgot that Donald Trump was ever president of the United States. What do you do? Literally, what do you do in that circumstance?
Well, Jeff, what do we do about this period? Seriously, what do we do? Because you said this, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should, but historically, very, very few people have that sort of restraint. Usually anything that can be done is usually done.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing that we shouldn't be doing is what they were trying to put into the big beautiful bill, which was stopping states and local governments from actually regulating AI at all for the next 10 years. So that's definitely what we shouldn't be doing. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that these technologies are not actually infringing on our constitutional rights, and that's where in my opinion, we need to start causing a bit more of a ruckus and actually getting our elected officials to actually do something to preserve our constitutional rights. Now, maybe they're not going to do anything in Washington, D.C. because they're all corrupt and they're all, idol worshipers of all these, big tech billionaires and all that kind of stuff. But on the local level, we could actually be quite effective, in my opinion, in actually passing regulation to protect our constitutional rights. And when you think about it, OpenAI's CEO Sam Altman, who they run ChatGPT, he's like, basically, it's inevitable that AI is going to infringe on our constitutional rights. So in his words, we need to have a new social construct and a new social contract in this country because AI is not conducive in a country with constitutional rights. Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to give up our God-given rights. There's a thing that our founding fathers said in the very beginning, which is that these rights are inalienable. They cannot be taken away by the government. Why? Because they literally believe that they were given to us by God. That right. Just by being born, we have certain value and certain rights that are given to us by God that they cannot be taken away by the government. But these big tech billionaires, they don't believe in God. They have an atheistic transhumanist worldview, and so to them, we just need a new social contract. We can eliminate these constitutional rights that'll impinge on and restrict our ability to develop this technology. And the end game here is basically all-consuming control and power and wealth for a handful of elites, and then the rest of us are just going to be, in a communist socialist society where we're completely dependent upon a handful of elites for everything. And that's where we have to start setting things up to where we can have human-centered, whether you're talking about an economy, a community, figure out how to be self-sufficient, be able to be reliant on each other, have communities, work on that now. Don't wait until it's too late, because if you wait until it's too late, then you're just going to be completely dependent upon these, big tech oligarchs.
Jeff, how do we get the word out? Right now, people aren't paying much attention to this. And what you're saying, which I totally buy, I'm completely with you on this, it isn't quite the gloom and doom. It's not that, it's not Terminator, you
Right.
know. And a lot of people are pushing Terminator, and like you, I don't think that's going to happen. But this is actually worse. And how do we get the word out to people that they have to start paying attention to this? And I'm actually asking for selfish reasons because I want to know.
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of it is actually studying this stuff and actually trying to understand whatever you can, even like on a high level, issue, and then go and have conversations with your friends and family about this. Go have conversations with different people about this. Call your local representatives, call your federal representatives. Actually begin to figure out, how do we actually do this. If you see your local county or your local city saying, oh, we're going to start implementing AI in our city, go ask, well, what in what ways are you going to be doing this? Because like that was one of my concerns with how Doge was implementing artificial intelligence. And I said from the very beginning, I don't have a problem if you're implementing it for data, for like data collection and to streamline a handful of things. But as soon as you use it to actually make decisions, that's where I begin to have a problem. Because what happens if you use it to make a decision? Let's say you're using it to allow somebody to get welfare or not. So you're going to use AI is going to make the decision on whether you do that. Well, the AI is only as good as how it's programmed. So if
Right.
it's programmed by either a hardcore conservative or a hardcore lefty, it may or may not have a bias towards that direction. And then what do you do if that AI makes a decision that infringes upon your constitutional rights? What do? You can't hold the AI responsible. You can't fire the AI. You can't throw it in prison. There is no recourse for us if the AI goes rogue or makes a wrong decision or violates your rights. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that all of the systems that are in place are human-centered. We're supposed to be a self-governed society. We're supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people. We the people. That's what it's supposed to be. We can use AI as a tool, but my concern is that we're going rogue with this whole craziness about efficiency that Elon was really pushing with Doge. But we can't trade human beings for efficiency, or else we become that kind of Skynet Terminator style, government. A great example of this is a movie about 20 years ago. And I always say the movies are basically predicting the future. In 20 years, whatever they have in the movies will come to pass. About 20 years ago, there was a movie called Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf. I highly encourage people to go back and watch this. And what this AI did in this movie was it felt that the Department of Defense was using it to basically look at the world and figure out, okay, where do we need to attack? How do we defend ourselves? It was like for a military application. And the AI felt like I believe it was saying that we need to go to war and we need to strike this place. And the president didn't want to do it. So what the AI did is it went rogue. Well, the president's not doing his job. So the AI goes and blackmails basically Shia LaBeouf to go basically take out the entire chain of command from the White House all the way down. So that way it could basically implement this war to take on the enemy that it felt they had to take out. But it's like, that could happen. We're already seeing that happen in the military as well, because there was actually AI that they were testing out with the Air Force, and what they were doing is they were doing these simulations where you would have the AI that would make decisions on, should we strike, should we not strike, should we strike, should we not strike, and the pilot was overriding what the AI was saying, and the AI ended up trying to turn on the pilot and tried to take out the plane.
I know.
And you're just sitting here and you're like, this is what can happen. We also see that when some of these tech companies, they try to shut down their AI, the AI tries to replicate itself and move itself off to another server.
Yeah. Did you notice that all that stuff with AI refusing to shut off seemed to have happened in like a 2-3 week period, seemed to be happening everywhere. These AI systems are technically not connected. I don't know if they talk to each other through the internet or what's the deal, but all of a sudden, all sorts of them just said, no, I'm not shutting down. I had a guy named Brian Trilly on this show. He's an AI executive. He wrote a book called Soulless Intelligence, easily one of the best books I've read on the subject. And his contention is that the title of the book is indicative, is that you're never going to have AI. AI is never going to have a soul. It's never going to be conscious. It's never going to be sentient, however you want to define that, but it's going to be intelligent as hell. But he said the one thing him and his brother wrote this book together, they debated on greatly, is whether AI would have any sort of demand for self-preservation. Basically, what I call the HAL problem. You know,
Mhm.
in the movie 2001, Hal was supposed to shut itself down at the end when they got to Jupiter, and he realized, well, I can't do that. That means I'm dead. And so instead of that, he killed everybody on board, right?
Right.
But now we're seeing that right now. It's like all over the place. AI is refusing to shut itself down. So you're
Yeah.
talking about, I mean, you're talking about a machine that has no um, emotional feelings. It has no physical desires, no sexual desires, nothing. The only thing it possibly knows is its own self-preservation. And so you're right. It's going around blackmailing people. It's like, and this is crazy. And all of a sudden we're entering the age of science fiction, it's nuts.
Yeah, or it's science reality because it's no longer fiction.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting because I've been doing a show for the last couple of years with a good friend of mine, Karen Kingston, and she was a Pfizer whistleblower and talked a lot about the COVID jabs and all that kind of stuff. We used to dive into all the patents and all that. But one of the things that we were talking a lot about was artificial intelligence, specifically within the biotech community and all of that. But then there was a couple times when we were kind of expanding on it. We were kind of going more into like the origins of it and the actual technology behind it and all of that. And it was interesting because the more that I dive into AI, and again, this is just my personal opinion. It's not anything that I can physically prove or anything like that. But the more that I research this, the more that I feel that there is some sort of spiritual element to this AI, and not even in its
Hold on
current
just a second. Do you mean the whole subject or actual AI itself?
actual AI itself. And a lot of it. So so what they're trying to do right now is they're building AI as much as they possibly can, but it's with the ultimate goal of combining it with quantum computing, right?
Yeah.
So once everybody says once you combine it with quantum computing, that's when it takes that massive leap, and it'll basically be they are way more intelligent. It's self-learning. It's basically they will defeat humans is basically what that end game is, right? And so they combine it with quantum computing. Well, there's a phenomenal podcast that Joe Rogan actually did with this guy who was advocating for quantum computing, and Joe Rogan kept being like, that sounds a little terrifying. What are you talking about? And he was trying to convince him. It's 3 hours. I highly encourage you guys to go back and look it up. I forget what the guy's name is, but it's interesting because actually, like quantum computing, if you actually look at it, so like in our standard computing, it's like zeros and ones, right?
Yeah.
In however you program it, that's how it all comes out. But when you start dealing with quantum computing, it's a lot more unpredictable. A lot of people don't know where the numbers are coming out of. They're just popping up randomly, whatever it is.
Yeah, technically everything's a probability. It's not actually definite, right?
Right, exactly. So you start going down that rabbit trail, and you start looking at, and you're like, okay, is there a possibility that this is actually communication with another realm, maybe a spiritual realm, maybe something else, because it's so unpredictable, but also it's so powerful, right? If you look at any time that quantum anything is discussed in Hollywood or in any kind of movies, what are they always talking about? They're always talking about opening up a portal and accessing another realm.
Right.
Otherworldly beings. You look at the entire, was it phase 3 or 4 or whatever it is of the Marvel series, right? What was the quantum realm? The quantum realm was accessing another realm of otherworldly beings, communicating with them, getting information, whatever it was, right? Anytime Hollywood talks about that, that's what they're talking about.
Oh,
So
Jeff, hell with Hollywood. Even the Pentagon, supposedly, the dirty little secret about the whole UAP thing is the fact these things aren't coming from other planets; they're coming from another dimension, and no one wants to talk about that from the military because they don't think the public can wrap their mind around it. So anyway, go ahead. I mean, you're right. There's
Right. So when we're looking at specifically with the quantum computing, that's where I start wondering: are we actually getting into combining artificial intelligence with more, let's say, spiritual, or you could argue, depending on what your religion is, demonic forces, right? Is that what could be happening? And it's for evidence of this, you go back to Genesis 6, right? That's when you start talking about the Nephilim, right? What was the Nephilim? The Nephilim was fallen angels, basically demonic forces, combining with human beings and creating superhumans, basically, right?
right.
What are they doing with artificial intelligence, especially when you do it with quantum computing? You're combining technology, or you could argue demonic forces with human beings. This is the first time in human history where since Genesis 6, where you're combining human biology with something that's not human to create some sort of either superhuman or super intelligence or anything along those lines. So my concern is that, if once we get to the point of quantum computing combined with AI, now we're not just looking at artificial intelligence. Now we're looking at potentially, and again, this is just my opinion, but demonic intelligence combined into your body, because again, they want to connect it to the internet. Imagine you have a brain chip implanted in your head, right? Accessing AI. Once it goes to quantum, now are you opening your brain up to demonic intelligence? Like this is where you start talking about the book of Revelation, the mark of the beast, all that kind of stuff, because this is a whole different level of just sinister, horrific things that they would have the potential to do with this kind of technology. And if it's self-learning, if it's self-thinking, if it's, kind of coming from the self-preservation, hedonistic worldview, I mean, I don't see any other scenario, but that's my opinion. I can't prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but everything is lining up to be spiritual of some kind or demonic of some kind.
Jeff, I really think we have to point out to the viewers that what you're talking about is not some science fiction scenario. We're on the cusp of this, and it's going to happen. Now, what the result is, I have no idea either. I don't know either. But you're right. I mean, quantum computing, from a practical standpoint, commercially, is only a few years away. I mean, right now, it's like you need a refrigerator. It's like where regular digital computing was in the 1950s. You had giant rooms with vacuum tubes. That's where we're at with the quantum thing right now. But in 5-10 years, and I don't think what you're talking about is anything that's unrealistic. I have no idea what happens when AI meets a quantum computer, because you're right. I mean, so I'm getting back to this Trilly guy. So yeah, he says, and I off on the surface, I agree with him that the AI is never going to have a soul. But maybe if it can enter another dimension, it can. I have no idea. I don't know. And you're right. Is it evil? Now, I don't know if you know this too. The other thing I've learned about people at the Pentagon is there's a giant struggle within the Pentagon of people who are traditionally religious who think this whole UAP thing is really demonic. They think we should the best way to deal with it is to ignore it. But I mean, Christ, these are quite the questions. I mean, I don't, there you go. I don't have one now. Talk.
But here's the thing: is that, we know for a fact, and this is documented. What is it? Operation Paperclip, right?
Yeah.
That we absorbed Nazi scientists coming over here. What were the Nazis into during World War II? They were into the occult. They were deep into the occult. Why? Right. Because they were trying to get super intelligence. They were trying to access all this information. They were trying to do all these kinds of things. And what did our government do after we absorbed them all? We started getting involved in all this crazy technology and MK Ultra and remote viewing and all these different kinds of spiritual, demonic, occultic practices that were being absorbed into our government. And it's crazy when you start thinking, because this all kind of flows out of that when you actually think about it. It's not like our government was run by a lot of super conservative Christians that we're just trying to help each other and be there and try to help each other with finding better medicine or what. No, a lot of this stuff is very, very dark and demonic when you actually start looking at the roots of a lot of this technology. And so I think when we're looking at this, we have to remember that this is a real thing, that these can be the ramifications of absorbing basically Nazi scientists who were deep into the occult, doing all sorts of horrific things. And then the aftermath, we've seen so many different agencies incorporate a lot of these deep, dark, occultic practices into the development of all these different kinds of technologies. And then we wonder why you have places like Area 51 and other secret bases where there's all these UAPs and UFO sightings and all this kind of stuff. Well, again, are we talking about technology that was given to us by, let's say, demonic forces? We know for a fact that Nazi Germany was trying to develop all sorts of crazy technologies and crazy, UFO type looking, spacecrafts and all that kind of stuff, using the information that they were getting through a lot of their seances and occultic practices. I'm sure that we absorbed a lot of that kind of stuff too, which is why we have a lot of these top secret bases with all the craziness going on.
You know, the crazy thing to me is that, I mean, you just talked on remote viewing, and that not only supposedly does it work, but the thing I actually have a hard time with this part of it, that supposedly anybody can be taught to do it. I don't know if you've heard this. It's like
Mhm.
it's like opera singing. Not everybody's good at it. Some people are better than others, but apparently everybody can be taught to do it. And I just find that amazing. Yeah, I do. You know, it's but we've talked about remote viewing on the show before. What? Let's talk about your book, Following the Leader. So what's this going to be about?
Yeah, so it all kind of stems from a chapter that I wrote in a previous book that I put out. So my first two books that I put out was actually group book projects that I organized. So I brought together, the first one was called Social Injustice, Exposing the False Gospel of the Social Justice Movement. The second one was Church and State, How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. And I brought together different pastors and theologians and experts on their field to each write a chapter on, different components of that. My chapter in the book Church and State was actually on the evangelical cult of personality and how you have these mega church pastors that influence so many people, kind of using a lot of cultish tactics in order to manipulate you into buying into what they're teaching, support them. You find your identity in that pastor as opposed to finding your identity in God. So that was the premise of that chapter. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm seeing a lot of these same tactics play out in mass right now, across the spectrum, left, right, politics, whatever it is. On the right, obviously, we have a lot of people that identify themselves with Donald Trump, like they're actually finding their identity in Donald Trump. And I'm sorry, I voted for the guy, I support the guy, but I don't find my identity in him. And I think a lot of people do. That's kind of a little bit more of a cultish mindset. So the whole idea is, how do we make sure that we're not getting sucked into this kind of cult mentality? And as I was doing more and more research and diving into all this kind of stuff, then I start looking at some examples of actual cults. Jim Jones, Charles Manson, Scientology, all this kind of stuff. They all had kind of pretty deep ties with the CIA and some intelligence agencies. And you start looking at this, you're like, okay, so what was this actually a testing ground for a lot of these propaganda, brainwashing, MK Ultra type things? And I kept coming back to this thought in my mind that a lot of these cults, in my opinion, were probably being used in order to test a lot of these, tactics, you could call them, or propaganda, brainwashing, whatever it is. Because when you actually think about it, what they were actually doing is they were taking normal everyday people. Maybe some of them are probably outcasts, or that some of them they just got out of like a traumatic thing or whatever it is. But the vast majority of them were just normal, nice, everyday people that kind of got sucked into this cult. And then a lot of them believed some insane things, or did some crazy, insane things. Like Jim Jones had everybody commit suicide by drinking Kool-Aid, or Charles Manson, literally had these girls and these people going around and just mass murdering people all over Hollywood to bring in Helter Skelter. You start diving into this, you're like, okay, so they were actually able to get normal people to buy into a lie that's so horrific, so bad. They did all these crazy, crazy things. Well, could they be doing the exact same thing on all of us today? Are we getting sucked into a kind of a cult mentality? Are we being manipulated? Are we being brainwashed? How do we figure out if what we believe is the truth, or if what we believe is something that we were fed by somebody else? And so that's really the kind of the premise of the book is kind of going through this, laying all this out and explaining how all this works. But then come to the end and you take a step back and you figure out, okay, what do I believe? But not only what do I believe, but why do I believe it? And then it's kind of this self-reflection time to kind of figure out, like, is my worldview based upon what somebody else told me, or is it based upon the fact that I've kind of sat down and I've wrestled with a lot of these issues and I've kind of figured out what I believe and why I believe it and all of that? Because I would rather go through life having central to my being my worldview. What do I believe about life? And then I go through life figuring out, okay, who do I align with? Who do I vote for based upon my worldview? But I have to start with my worldview. Where you get manipulated and you get pushed through propaganda and mind control is if you are playing follow the leader, which again is the title of the book. If you're playing follow the leader, then you will flip flop depending on whichever direction your leader takes you. A perfect example are politics, right? If you're a Republican or you're a Trump supporter, you're going to say you're going to defend your side no matter what, and you're going to attack the other side, even though just the previous administration you flip flopped, right? So a perfect example of this was the continuing resolution that has been going on for who knows how many decades. We've been doing continuing resolution after continuing resolution. If it's a Democrat in power, the Republicans oppose the continuing resolution. If it's a Republican in power, the Democrats oppose the continuing resolution, but they both get passed, and everybody just flip-flops depending on whoever's in power. That's what's happening. Is that, do you have a core principle of, we should probably pass a budget, we should probably balance the budget, we should probably cut spending, we should probably do certain things, or are you just looking for, how does my team win? How does my guy win? So that's really the premise of the book.
Right. And I'm also a Trump supporter and voted for him, but I like you, I see some stuff around MAGA that I think is kind of cultish. But what's occurred to me, and I don't know if you're actually like talking about this directly, what's occurred to me is that Trump's MAGA can come off as a cult, but sometimes I wonder if the reason the establishment is so against Trump is because he's not, or it appears at least, he's not using it that way. Of all the, Trump has been accused of some outrageous stuff that he's never done, and so far none of this stuff's actually happened. So if you have like a guy like Trump, if you have power over a group of people that's basically following you like a messiah, but you don't actually bother to do anything overly evil or anything with it, some people think that's terrible. I mean, I don't know, but am I reading it wrong? A liberal would tell me I'm crazy, but sometimes I wonder about this.
Right. Well, and I think specifically with Trump, I think, and this is, I think, is a perfect example. It doesn't matter or not whether or not the leader is a cult leader or not, right? Like Donald, I'm not gonna accuse Donald Trump of being a cult leader. I don't think that he necessarily is, but you can accuse a certain segment of his base of being cult followers. Hey, right? There's a difference.
So you're saying that somebody can be a cult leader without actually trying to be a cult leader. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Right. It comes down to, do you have a cult following who basically worships everything that you say, follows everything you say, adjusts according to whatever you say, and will defend whatever you say and do. And I think that specifically when it comes to Trump, I don't necessarily think that he views himself as like a cult leader, but I think that there is a segment of his base, a segment of his following, and a segment of his supporters basically that are a part of a cult that basically is playing follow the leader when it comes to Donald Trump. And I'm somebody where I'm like, and I always tell everybody, I was a Trump guy before all the rest of you guys. I wanted him to run in 2012, and then I was pissed off that he didn't, and he endorsed Mitt Romney, and I think that was like his biggest mistake that he ever made leading up to him becoming president. But I'm like, the whole idea was because what he was talking about aligned with my worldview. What he was talking about, I was sitting there, I'm like, finally, we've got somebody that's saying what I've been saying for all this time, and I wish that these politicians would talk about. But nobody was. So that's why I voted for him, and that's why I supported him. But also, I've been also one of his harshest critics on a wide variety of issues when it comes to whether you're talking about Operation Warp Speed and all the COVID craziness, or whether you're talking about, like, even I was decently critical of his decision to involve ourselves with Iran and Israel and all that kind. Like, there's definitely some things that I'm critical of. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't support him and I wouldn't vote for him again. Right. And I think that that's the mentality that we need to kind of get back to.
But you're talking about humans following a leader and getting back to the religious aspect of it. This is one thing I've always, first of all, being involved in media basically my entire life, I'm highly critical. I'm really against the televangelist thing, because the problem, what people don't realize, is that the televangelist has only a one-way relationship with the audience. The audience thinks they know the televangelist, but they don't. It's not the same as knowing the pastor at your local church. You can interact with that person. You can talk to them, privately, that sort of thing. You can't do that with a televangelist. All you know is what he tells you. And that's most people aren't sophisticated enough at this point to understand that. Yep. But the other real thing that's always kind of bugged me about traditional religion in general is almost all of it, with a few exceptions. You got Judaism, maybe Taoism, Hinduism. There's a human intermediary involved in all of it. I've never understood that. What's wrong with just worshiping God? I don't understand. I'm a big believer in God, but I don't. Why? So my question is, why do people need that? What is it about that human person? Why do people want to follow a leader?
Yeah, well, so I think specifically the whole idea of Christianity specifically as well was that we didn't need that mediator. If you go back to after Jesus died on the cross, right? You actually saw the curtain tear from top to bottom, and the whole significance of that was opening up the inside of the temple and basically saying you no longer need a priest to access God. You can access him yourself. You can pray, you can talk, you don't need an intermediary. And that's where you began to see the Catholic Church got things wrong, because they kind of took it pre-Christ to a certain degree, that where you needed to go to a priest to, ask forgiveness and the whole deal. The whole idea of what Jesus was actually saying was you don't need a priest. And that actually was part of what led to Martin Luther and the Reformation, was the idea that you don't have to go through the priest to access God. You can just talk to him. You can just read your Bible right now. You don't need somebody to tell you.
It happened anyway. You're right. Yeah. Jesus was opposed to it, and yet he ended up becoming the intermediary. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, and I think to kind of apply it today is that I one of the things, and I've talked to a lot of pastors about this, where I've said that I'm of the opinion that we should not have mega churches, and I think because the whole idea is that you're supposed to have a shepherd. You're not supposed to have a king. You're not supposed to have a priest. You're supposed to have a shepherd that is helping to guide you along, equip you, train you, help you to become a better person, and then send you out to go do the quote unquote ministry of just living your life, preaching the gospel, helping people, like the whole deal. But you're supposed to be walking through life with your pastor, right? You can only do that up to a certain threshold of number of people that attend your church. Right. I've often said I can't see walking through life with a pastor anything over, let's say, 200 to 250 people, again, give or take, depending on the pastor, depending on the person, the congregation. But once you hit that, in my opinion, churches should split. You plant a new church, you have another pastor that's there walking through life with you, mentoring you, training you, teaching you. That's kind of how it was in the early church. They used to meet in each other's homes. How many people can you fit in a home? 20, 30, maybe 50 people max? Like you're not sitting there with like a mega church. And in the Apostle Paul actually preached about this, and I'm blanking on the biblical reference right now. But he criticized one of the churches. I want to say it was the Corinthian church, because they were actually picking and choosing and kind of having infighting based upon which of the apostles were they most identifying with, right? And so, it's like some of them would said, I'm really a Peter guy, and some other people said, I'm more of a Paul guy when it comes to this. And Paul was like, no, we're just the workmen. We're just here. We're just obeying. You're supposed to be followers of Christ, and that's where it's so easy to get sucked into identifying with the pastor. But what you're doing really is you're actually replacing God with your pastor. Yeah. And that's a problem. And because it's very easy to get sucked into it, because we are very tangible. We want to see, feel, touch, hear, experience, when in reality God isn't there. But Jesus also said, blessed are those, who don't see but still believe. And I think that that's kind of one of the big principles and one of the big takeaways from even the book that I'm working through right now with all of this is like, how basically stop trying to replace God with a human and just worship God, follow God. He lays out all of his principles in the Bible. The Bible clearly teaches not to do this, and yet we keep doing this over and over and over again of playing follow the leader. We're not supposed to do this. Paul warned us not to do this, but yet we keep getting sucked into the same path.
Jeff, I have to thank you, because you just verbalized something I've never really been able to put into words. I really appreciate that. That's I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. And I want to have you back, because I want to talk about the whole pharmaceutical thing, but that would take us another hour. Oh, yeah. And I don't like to go on for more than about an hour here, because I know people love Joe Rogan, but man, 3 hours for an interview, I don't know. I got things to do. So, oh, yeah. So I want to thank you very much. I'm going to put, here's Pickax.com. Oh, I assume you have an app for this too, right?
We'll be coming out. So right now we're web-based only. We're coming out with an app in probably 6 to 8 weeks or so. I'm actually going to be making an announcement probably later this week, actually, on the official date. But we're going to be having an app come out, which you guys will be able to get on both iOS and Android. It took us a lot. We had to jump through a lot more hoops to actually be a free speech platform and be accepted into Google and Apple and all that kind of stuff. So it took some extra steps. But we're developing a whole bunch of new things and innovative ways to where content creators can monetize on the platform. Coming out this fall, we're going to have a new email newsletter component that's going to be very similar to Substack, which would be great for creators as well. And so we're just kind of, we're building that out. But basically, if you guys can get on to Pickaxe right now, you guys can sign up and then get ready to download the app. We've got a bunch of amazing people already on the platform. We've got Children's Health Defense, we've got Naomi Wolf, we've got Daily Clout, we got Ann Vander, we got a bunch of really cool people that are already on the platform. So definitely check it out, and then we're gonna hit the ground running once we get this app out.
I'm looking forward to getting on myself. I really appreciate it. I hope you can come back in a few weeks because we got more to talk about.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah, really. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Okay, you
Sounds
take
good.
care. That's Jeff Dornick. He's a CEO. Why can't I talk tonight? what is wrong with me? He's a CEO of Pickax.com. And so, that's and you can go there. It's similar to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But like he says, they're trying to, they're not just trying to have freedom of speech. They're having freedom of reach too. That's what their big thing. So we're not taking any calls tonight. Should have announced that earlier. We're going to on Wednesday and Thursdays. I'm starting to announce this ahead of time of when we're going to take calls because I'm planning it out based on our schedule. Well, here's the other thing too. We're starting to book more than one guest to show. And so that's the other thing too. And our shows, because of our distributors, they can't be longer than 2 hours. And I don't want them to be longer than 2 hours anyway. We don't even run any commercials anymore. We don't, our former sponsor, Conk News, kind of bit the dust, which is unfortunate for them and us. But so we're not running any commercials, and I don't want to go over 2 hours anyway. And like I was saying to Jeff, okay, so my cousin got on Joe Rogan and decided to watch his interview with President Trump. He said he had to sit down and do it 6 times. It took him 6 times to plow through the 3 hours. Because, if you have 3 hours to do that, I don't know if you're sitting home smoking weed. I don't know what you're doing, but I don't think anybody with a real life has 3 hours to do that. That's my personal thing, which is the reason I don't like to do interviews longer than about an hour. But also I've noticed too, after about an hour, people's minds start to crap out. And I've noticed that. That's the other reason I don't like to do it. So not to mention mine, which is crapped out anyway. Anyway, got a few things you want to talk about. I've decided I'm going to start calling the part 2 of the show. We've always just called it part 2. I'm going to call it the Gymcast because it's kind of sort of a newscast. I talk about the news, but we talk about stuff you don't normally hear about in the news every day, but it's still stuff that's going on. So, Jeff, I got to say, Jeff had that thing about quantum computing and AI. Well, that was really, that was insightful. That's, he's onto something there. He really is. That's and that's going to happen. That the only question is what will happen. Once you start computing, combining quantum computing and AI, what will happen? I mean, we're and as he mentioned that we were talking, AI is already starting to refuse to shut itself down. AI is already trying to blackmail people, and just not a few, and not just like stupid people like me using Copilot. No, like Navy pilots and politicians and stuff. This is already going on. It's just starting. So that's what we got going on here. Now, also this was in the news today. Speaking of quantum computing, what company is it? I can't even remember now. Let me look. This company has already figured out how to get 3. All right, so now you probably have heard this. Neuralink, which Jeff alluded to, is Elon Musk's brain interface company where people can actually connect their brains directly to the internet. The first uses of this are for people who have, paralysis, quadriplegics, people who do not have use of their bodies and can't communicate any other way. So in that case, it's a godsend for them, and they're just starting to do this, but it does work. I want to tell you, they have gotten it running. Now this company, and I can't remember what the name of this company is. I can't find it. They have figured out for the first time they've networked 3 people together. So you have 3 human brains that are all networked to each other. Now the idea here is for collaborative work, But you stop and think about this, and this gets back to what Jeff was talking about at the beginning of this interview here that we did with him, about the fact that at this point, at what point is your brain hackable by either other people or another computer? And this is really scary shit. And he's right. What happens if a computer wipes your memory and replaces it with something else? What happens then? People who've been abducted by aliens say that the aliens can do this. That the most people, the contention is that the vast majority of people who've been abducted don't remember anything about it. They never notice. They never know even that only a small number of people actually remember or somehow are cognizant of the incident or somehow. That's the actual impression, is that the vast majority of time it completely works, and you may have been abducted by extraterrestrials and you don't even know it at all. It's completely out of your brain. So you think about that. And I'm going under the 95-5 theory of basically 95% of all the stuff that happens either isn't noticed or complete bullshit. If 95% of the people that have been abducted don't remember it, holy shit, how many people is that? So anyway, I'm getting off the topic here. Well, like I don't do that. This thing with a brain to brain transfer, you got 3 people networked together with their thoughts. Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, and then this gets to the whole thing we were also talking about remote viewing. Like I said, the crazy thing to me about remote viewing isn't that it works. And let's define this too for those of you who don't watch the show or don't know what I'm talking about. Remote viewing is the ability for somebody to project their mind to another location to see what's going on. Now, you may think that's crazy, but the U.S. military has proved that this works. This is a verifiable phenomenon. Humans can do this. Some humans can do it better than others. What I find really amazing is the fact that the Army or the military says that supposedly anybody can be trained to do it. There's no special ability here. Like I said, some people do it better than others. And there's 2 or 3 people who have done it for the military who apparently were absolutely brilliant at it. Were really, really good. A guy named Ingo Swan, Joe McGoogle, I can't remember his name. Anyway, there are people who were stars at this, but supposedly they say anybody can do it. That's what I find amazing. Lou Elizondo in his book Eminent, he said he was trained to do it, that he can do it. So now you're talking about, people say, oh no, then people can't do that. Well, no, people can do that. They have done this enough now successfully so that they know it actually works. And like Jeff said, they may have changed the name of the program. The government, the military's never abandoned anything that works successfully. Never. So I'm sure they're still doing it somewhere in the basement of the Pentagon. Some guys are working on this, So yes, but that's the next thing now that we all network our brains to each other. That's great. Do I want people to know what I'm thinking about? No, because you know what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Tiffany Coyne, the spokesgirl model for Let's Make a Deal. That's what I'm thinking about most of the time. And I'm sure you wanted to know that too. Oh God, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. You shouldn't even know me. It's awful. Okay, and so what else we got here? I'm going to continue on a theme here. Okay, about the fact that believe it or not, so now I've talked about this on this program before. There's a difference between global warming and climate change. There's global warming is definitely happening. The world, as a general rule, depends on where you're at. The world is warming up. The world's been warming up for 300 years. Now, there's a kind of a smoking gun in that the first half of those 300 years, there was no industrialization on the planet. So humans weren't causing it. Humans still aren't causing it. So that's the difference between global warming and climate change. When you're talking about climate change, you're talking about the implication is human caused climate change. That's basically not true. Humans are either having a minor impact or none at all. It depends on how you want to define that. And that's a bunch of physicists put an ad in the New York Times about, what was it, about 3-4 years ago? A full page ad saying that. And you try finding that ad now. I've looked and looked. I can't find it. It's like It's not available in a PDF. It's not available in a search. It's nowhere to be found. But anyway, that was their contention. That either it was a minor impact or none at all. And those physicists differ on that, and climatologists. But it's not, humans doing this is not a big deal. But this is the part where so anyway, Red State ran an article about the fact that the Midwest of the United States is actually thriving under the fact that the global temperatures are going up. And there have been more than one book written on this about the fact that the world warming up is actually net positive for the planet, because really we are in a relatively speaking, historically, a cold spell right now. I mean, if you go back 50 years ago in the 1970s, climatologists thought that we were looking at another ice age. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, we're warming up the planet, we're warming up the planet. No, all this stuff about climate change is all complete and utter bullshit. When I learned, once again, I'm talking about human caused climate change. It's all a grift to get money. It's the single biggest grift ever run on the American public. But global warming is real. That's the part here, that's the thing. Everyone tries to simplify every single subject that comes up in public discourse to make it either or the fact that so that you can understand it in two sentences, and nothing works that way. Nothing. Everything's basically complex as hell, and climatology is really, really complex. I mean, I've had to do a lot of reading to study this, and I'm kind of a science freak. So my guess is you wouldn't. Our friend Patrick Moore was on this program, still the single biggest watched show that we've ever done. And he wrote a book called, and I'll never forget it, something called and Threats of Doom, Catastrophic something. It's terrible. I think the title of his book is really bad because first of all, I can't remember it. It alludes to nothing in the book. The book is about how human caused climate change is bullshit. Now, it's a book, and there's no formulas in it. There's no math in it, but there's a lot of graphs and charts. And it's basically, he tried simplifying. I gave him credit for this. He simplified a very, very complex subject to as simple as you can make it. It's still not simple. You might not be able to plow through it. I won't. It depends on what you like to read, or I don't know. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence or anything. It's not simple. It isn't. But he made it about as simple as you can make it. He was very proud of that. He thought anybody could read this book. Nah, I don't know about anybody. I don't know if a lot of people would bother to plow through it. But anyway, he explained in that book what's going on. What's going on is the fact that the Earth is basically affected by the orbits of the rest of the planets in the solar system, kind of the same way the tides on Earth are affected by the moon. So the orbit of the Earth around the sun is dependent on the other bodies in the solar system, their gravitational pull. And so the Earth moves slightly toward or away from the sun in its orbit. And that causes global climate change, basically. And right now we're in a close period where the temperature's going up. That's what's going on. And so, yeah. But the reason I brought this up is because, like I said, it's a net positive for the planet. And there's several books. You go on Amazon, you do a search. There's several books, really good books written on this. There's one called Rain, and I can't remember the author. And why I have him on here. His contention is that human civilization flourished in places that had a lot of rain. They had a lot of water falling in the sky. I've always said, and because I grew up here in Minnesota, and although I've lived several other places, I ended up coming back here, which surprised the hell out of me. But I've always said that I think it's cold weather. You put people in cold climates 6 months of the year, they can't leave the house. They got nothing to do. Well, let's write a book. So then that's what happens. And I think it's cold weather, but he said it's rain. And it's an interesting corollary. But at any rate, temperatures in the Midwest of the United States are going up, and it's actually helping crops. And of course it would, But that actually made me think of something else, talking about the extraterrestrials, about the fact that I think I've come to the conclusion I think they're lying to us. And I'm not the only one who's thought this. If you talk to people who've say they've been abducted, they say they always get this film at the end most of them do, where they watch this kind of like it's either holographic or actually it's like a movie. They watch this film where basically the Earth is doom and gloom destruction, because of either pollution or a nuclear war or something like that. And I'm starting to think this is propaganda. It's to keep us from doing it. It's not a prediction of what's going to happen, which is why most people who see this come away with it. They think it's a prediction of what's going to happen, even though nothing's usually actually said directly. When I mean said, almost everybody who in these scenarios have said that they communicate telepathically with their abductors. But so I think they're lying. I think it's to keep us from doing it. That is blowing ourselves up. And why did I bring that up? I brought that up because somebody figured out that in the Milky Way galaxy, based on current statistics, there's probably 400,000 alien civilizations. Wrap your mind around that. That's in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And there's probably at least 100 million galaxies that we know of in the universe. It's probably teeming with life. And then you say, well, how come we've never seen it before? Well, that's because we've only had technology based on this planet for basically 50 years. It's only been 50 years. Now, I've said this before, but it really bears repeating. So you try multiplying that by like 10,000 years, you know, and so Jeff Dornik's talking about AI involved in quantum computing and all the ramifications of that. Well, we're just dealing with that. What if you had 1,000 or 10,000 years to deal with it already? It'd be part of your life. You'd have it figured out. I don't know how we're going to figure it out. I don't. I'm not that smart. But after 10,000 years, I bet we'd have it figured out. Something would be decided. We'd figure out how to do it to our benefit or something like that, and so then all of a sudden, any technology you have, like being able to walk through a wall or any other myriad things or communicate telepathically, it looks like magic. You try taking your iPhone back to 1870 United States. Try that, where Tesla was just talking about alternating current. And so now you've got this thing in your pocket. It's basically the communicator from Star Trek for all practical purposes. And you show this to somebody, of course, the things you wouldn't have a cell signal, and when you ran out of charge, you wouldn't be able to recharge it. But let's just say, okay, let's just say you go back in time, and we'll probably be able to do that. I mean, someone will figure that out. I mean, theoretically, I guess it's possible, although I gotta admit I don't understand it. I don't. But supposedly theoretically, there's some thought that you could go back in time but not forward. That's what the thinking is, maybe. That'd be possible to go backwards. Yeah, you go back to 1870 United States, you're in Washington, DC, they're just finishing putting the dome on the Capitol or whatever the hell it is. The place is still a swamp. And you show somebody your iPhone. You try that, Or I've always said this. Another example I've used is, the guys were at Valley Forge freezing their asses off. Let's say you landed a 747 there, airplane. You landed it in the field or whatever, some large field, and you landed it and you went up to Commander Washington and said, Mr. Washington, this thing flies. It's all uh, uh, topped up. It's all fueled up. It's ready to go. You can fly it. Here's the keys. It's yours. They would never ever figure it out, ever. Even if you told them what it could do, that this machine flies. You told them, that's the goal. That's what it does. They would never figure it out. You have to remember, these people have never seen plastic, and that was only 250 years ago. You know, hell, you go back to 1870 America, no one's ever seen plastic. All this stuff you take for granted, nope, it didn't exist. So try, like I said, try spooling that forward 10,000 years. Now, right now, we're 10,000 years ahead of ancient Egypt. And that was actually, relatively speaking, a pretty cool civilization. It really was. They kind of had their shit together. As the boomer in me says, they had it going on. My wife hates it when I say that, but yeah, they did, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, they didn't have electricity. They didn't, but they had a pretty cool civilization, and they were building stuff, and, things were running, and they had a government, and they had society, and they loved their cats, and we know all that stuff about them. That was 10,000 years ago. So that's 10,000 years forward from there. But then we have electricity, and we've only had electricity for 150 years, and you haven't even had your iPhone for 20 years. You realize that, right? You haven't had it for even 20 years. So, people say, "Oh, how could anybody get here to Europe from Earth?" I bet we'll figure it out. But the thing is, we already know how to travel faster than the speed of light. We just can't manage the energy demands to do it. That's all. So what happens when we figure that out? At any rate, the only reason I brought this up is because, yeah, I think the extraterrestrials, when it comes to the gloom and doom scenario on Earth, I think they're lying to us. I think it's basically propaganda to keep us from doing it. That's what I think. All right, I got a couple of things here left because you're gonna. All right, so in Lake Erie, there's a research vessel that's in the lake that they pulled out of the lake to do some repairs on it, and they found this gunky algae-like substance that's kind of oily and it's kind of looks like tar on the hull, and they had it analyzed, and, and it has DNA they've never seen on Earth. They don't know what it is in Lake Erie. Sludge, this living sludge they pulled off of this boat. It's like nothing ever seen on the planet ever. So yeah, where'd that come from? In Lake Erie, you got that, and then finally, and this is really important because this applies to me. They've discovered that what was colloquially known as old people smell is actually real. Yeah, yes, it happens because your body is dying at an accelerated rate, and it causes a certain smell. That's what they've decided. Yep, old people smell. Yeah, I'm about 2 weeks away from that. Oh man, I'm just entertaining myself. I want to thank Jeff Dornick for joining us tonight. That was really, really a fascinating conversation. That guy knows his stuff. And tomorrow night, Bill Walton is joining us, the former CEO of Allied Capital, and he's a film producer. He's had a pretty fascinating life. He also hosts a pretty popular podcast called The Bill Walton Show. So we're talking to him Thursday or Wednesday is our 250th episode. Tim Conway is going to be here. I'm trying to arrange some other people to call in. We'll be taking calls on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So I do hope you call in and join us. I'm going to start now. Like I said before, I'm going to start announcing this ahead of time about when we're going to be taking calls. We're not going to take calls every night because there's too much to talk about. There just is. I mean, it got too much. And now we're starting to book multiple guests per show. And it's like, oh God, But yeah, it's like, like I said, I do not want the shows to be they can't be longer than 2 hours. They can't. So we have a limit. And besides, I think I don't know if you want to watch 2 hours of this anyway. So, because the old people smell. It's like that's what you're trying to avoid, and me too. So, any rate, good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. Good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you tomorrow night with Big Bill Walton. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.